Hi everybody, Kay here again, and today I'm back to give you guys a much overdue tutorial. I made a mini album several months ago already. I can't believe how time flies, on the Alpine with the Alpine collection by Authentique. I no longer have that mini album, so that's why I can't show it. But I promised you guys those months ago that I would come back with a tutorial, and this is it. I'm finally here to show how I make this kind of mini album. So for this mini album, I'm using the Pleasant collection by Authentique, and yeah, just making sure that was a collection. The Pleasant collection by Authentique, which is an auto-themed paper collection, and I am using a different border to make the dies and a different approach. However, I will let you know that, and I will provide the link to the Alpine mini album in the description box below, just in case you're interested in looking at it and seeing what I'm talking about. But for the Alpine mini album, this is the die that I used. It is a die by Spellbinders. I still have the insert, and it is the Spellbinders Nestabilities Labels 38 die. So this is the die that I used to create the background of, or the base of my mini album. So how I go about creating the base of the mini album with these thin dies is very different how I go about, or how I went about making the background for this mini, because for this mini I used one of the Big's border dies. The plaque and postage die is what I used to make the border for the mini. And these kinds of dies cut through everything. They cut through chipboard fabric, several layers of papers put together. So this is a lot easier to use. So I'm gonna do the tutorial on how I used this die to make this mini album. However, if you're interested on how I went about making the base of my mini album with this dies, or these kinds of dies, the thin dies, I have that all the way at the very end of this tutorial. So if you're interested in that, just stick around all the way to the end. If you're not interested in it, then you don't need to watch it. Just watch this tutorial then. All right, so let's get started. A brief overview on the mini album that I'm making. I'm not going to get into detail of this one because I have that at the end as well. But this is what it looks like. It measures, Lord, I don't know where I left my ruler. Here it is. It measures about 8 inches in height and 5.5 inches in width. And here it is from the side. Here's the back. And here's the other side, and of course the front. It is, the closure is a jute string, and it opens up like this, and you can flip through it. I'm gonna flip through it real quick, like that. You have a swing pocket here, double pocket here. The back, once you're on the back, you can swing it open again, and it's a mirror image of the other side. Just the papers are different. Here's another swing pocket. And here's the front, and of course this does fold out, and I'm gonna be out of camera at this point because it folds out pretty wide, but you get the idea. So it opens up like this, and here's the other side, and of course you could display it on any shelf or table for display purposes, because it is sort of like a zigzag mini album. So there it is. That's the right way to do it. So it does stand up and you can put it on display. So if you're interested in seeing how I made this, stay tuned. Project, I'm going to be using the Pleasant collection by Authentique, and as you can see, it is an autumn themed collection filled with beautiful earth tones and autumn designs. Autumn is my favorite time of the year, so I had no issues creating with this collection. Now the width of your mini album, the base of the mini album, is determined by what border you use to create the top of the mini. So for this particular mini, I'm using the Plaque and Postage die by Tim Holtz. And I'll be using this one in particular. So I'm not sure if the camera can capture that, but that's the one that I'll be using. So when I measured the width of this border, it measures 5.5. So that's what determined the width of my mini album. So the width of my mini album is 5.5 inches. So you're going to be needing, oh, and I'm using lightweight chipboard for the base of my mini. So you're going to be needing 2 pieces measuring 5.5 by 5, 2 pieces measuring 5.5 by 6.5, and 1 piece measuring 5.5 by 8. Once you cut your chipboard out, I suggest that you decide which papers you're gonna put on your mini. And I've already decided that. The reason I do this is because it's a cascading mini album. So you kind of want to pick your papers so that you can kind of see what they look like put together. So what I've decided was this is basically how it's going to be. So you have a pretty good idea already of what your album is going to look like. So once you have your papers picked out and how you want your album to look, the next step is to cut the top border out. So I'm going to show you that part next. So as you can see, I've already started. This is what it's looking like so far. And I'm going to do the last page on camera so that you can see how I go about cutting the border. So I do not glue the papers down. The reason for that is because I'm going to be adding hinges to put the base, all the pages together, plus pockets and any other kind of embellishments, pullouts, belly bands. I haven't even decided yet what exactly I'm going to put in here. But when you add things like pockets and hinges, those are usually adhered behind designer paper. So you don't want to glue these already before you start putting your album together, because you're probably going to have to need to get under there to attach things. So this is why I don't glue the pages together. But I do run them through the Big Shot all together so that the border can be perfectly aligned, as you can see that. So the way I keep the pages together so they don't shift is washi tape. So I aligned them nicely and I attached a washi shape towards the bottom because I'm going to be cutting the top border. There. So that will keep your pages from shifting. And then you run it through the Big Shot or your machine, whatever machine you have. Make sure that the design of the paper is facing the correct way. That's another thing too. Always make sure that your design is facing the right way before you run it through. So here's my die. And what I did is, you can't really see it, but with a black Sharpie, I actually made marks right above where the cut of the border is so that I know where to align my paper. This is just for the top piece. The sides I pretty much eyeball because it goes right to the ends. So there's really not much measuring to do there. So that's what I'm going to do now. So the next step is probably putting the pages of the mini album together. So I'll be right back to show the next step. All right, let's continue. So what I did next was I actually inked around all the edges of all my pages, as you could see here. This is optional. You don't have to do this. I do like it though, because it helps define the edges more and they stand out. So I like that effect. And for that, I used a Rich Cocoa by Memento dye ink. I also used a lot of Tim Holtz's Distress inks. So either one of those will work, but this is the one that I had handy right now, so, and it matches the collection. So I ended up just using this one. So after you've inked all the edges, you cut your hinges. So all the base of the mini, all the pages are put together with hinges. So for this mini, you're gonna need 2 hinges measuring, let's see here, 1 3/8 by 3 5/8 in length. For this mini, I've given it a 3/8 inch gusset. For my Alpine mini, I gave it a 1/4 inch gusset. So it depends on how much dimension you're gonna put in your mini album. If you're gonna leave it relatively flat, you don't need much of a gusset. I like to add a lot of inserts and embellishments to my mini albums, so this is why I decided for this mini I wanted a wider gusset. So this has they're gonna have a 3/8 inch of a gusset. So 2 of these measure 1 3/8 by 3 5/8, and 2 more measure 1 3/8 by 5 1/8. Okay, and the way you're going to adhere your pages together, I like to start from left to right and lay it out in front of me. So this is my first page, and the way it's going to work is, and the way I did it so that I could remember, the tabs, this is what I call the tabs of the hinges right here. These little pieces right here that you're going to attach the pages to. So the first one from left to right is gonna, the tabs are going to face you. So it's going to go like that. And here's your second page. The next hinge, the tabs are going to face away from you. So they're going to be adhered this way. See what I mean by away from you? The tabs face away from you. So makes sense to me. I hope it makes sense to you. And of course you can come up with your own system, but this is a system I came up with. So here's your third page. And then you alternate the hinges. So basically if the first ones are facing you, second one is, the tabs are facing away from you, then the third tab will be facing you. The tabs will be facing you. Goes like that. And for your last page, the tabs are going to be facing away from you. So it's going to go like that. I'm a little bit off camera, but you get the idea. Like that. All right. So, like I said, I start working from left to right. So from the first page, this is going to be my first page. You have to also keep in mind how your mini album is going to fold. So here's my hinge. Tabs are facing me. I like to attach my hinges to the insides of the pages, but that is also up to you. You can also attach them on the outside, behind the designer paper, of course. But I like to hide the hinges as much as possible, so that's why I like to attach them on the inside. So if tabs are facing you, it's going to be adhered like this underneath the designer paper, and it's going to fold like this. So that's going to be my front, and that's what I want. And then here's the second page, and that's going to go on the inside as well, like that. And then you're going to adhere the designer paper on top, and then that's going to fold like this, and that's going to form your first page. So I'm only going to do the first page on camera, and then, you know, that should be enough for you to get the idea on how to do the other pages. Okay, so I've adhered my first 2 pages together. I did forget to mention before that some of you probably noticed that I have snipped or angled my tabs. So you can see it there. Slightly angled them on both sides. And the reason I do this is, again, I like to hide my hinges as much as possible. So when they're at an angle like that, you can hide them better behind the designer paper. Another tip too, well, how did I decide the height of my hinges? I go off my shortest page. So my shortest page measures, you know, pretty much about 3 3/4. So I like to make the hinges slightly shorter than that, which is how I came up with 3 5/8. All right, so there you go. My hinge is flush against the border. I'm sorry if I go off camera there, but that's what I was trying to do. So there's your first page. Okay, and then the next step is you adhere your designer paper on top. If you don't plan on adding anything extra. So I don't really think I'm gonna add anything extra on these first 2 pages. So that's gonna be my next step, is that I'm gonna be adhering the designer paper on top. So, and eventually it's gonna look like that. So for my next page, I just go by the flow of the hinges. So the first one, the tabs are facing me. The next one, the tabs are facing down. So that means that I'm gonna attach it behind this one, like that. And this is gonna go, I think it has to go like this way. Oops. Goes like that. And then I want the stripes to be on the back. So that means that, yeah, so that's fine. So I could attach it like this, and then I just have to make sure that the designer paper that I attach on the back is the stripes. But you get the idea. And then I'm going to do the same for the rest of the pages so I can put my mini album together. All right, so my only tip is to just ensure that you adhere the designer paper pretty much at the end. I would just wait until the end, until you have it all the base attached, and then you can make sure you can add your designer paper, because then you're pretty much at a point where you know what's gonna go on each page. All right, so let me finish putting this album together and I'll be right back. So I'm back to show you the progress of my mini. As you can see, I've done a lot. I've attached all the pages. I've attached the designer paper to just about all the pages as well. I've created the mats, a couple of tuck spots and mats and pockets. The majority of the mats, I haven't adhered the designer paper to yet. I'm still working on that. But the main reason that I wanted to take a break and stop was because I did want to show you guys one part of the process. Now, how you decorate these minis is really up to you. You can do pockets, you can do belly bands, which is what I've done here already. You can do envelopes, you can do a couple of things. So one of the things that I like to do with these kinds of minis is what I call a standalone swing pocket, which is what this is right here. And it's basically what the name is. It's a pocket that stands alone, and you could swing it back and forth. So I'm going to show you how to make this standalone pocket. So I already did it on one side, but I haven't done it on the other side. So I saved that for this tutorial. So you definitely want to adhere your pocket to the base of the mini, and that is why I have not adhered the designer paper yet to the base, because I have to do the pocket. So the pockets for this mini measures, and this is it right here, I already have it pre-cut and scored. 3 inches by 11 1/8 inches in length, I guess. So in length it's 11 1/8, and height it's 3 inches. And then I've scored it at, that's the one thing I didn't write down. I scored it at 5 1/4. So I've scored it at 5 1/4 inches. And then on the other side, I scored 1/2 inch, which is going to be the hinge that you're going to use to attach to your mini. And I did give the pockets a very small gusset, 1/8 inch. So after your 1/2 inch, you move over in it 1/8 inch, and that is your gusset. And the reason that I like to make these small little gussets on these pockets is so that they lay flat when you swing them back and forth. What I've noticed in the past is when I don't leave any kind of gusset and I start putting things inside the pocket tends to kind of stick out like that, and I don't like that. I like my pockets laying flat. So if you give it 1/8 inch of a gusset, that helps. And that's it. So you cut it, you score it, and then you attach it to the base of the mini, which is what I'm going to do now. So here's your hinge, and once again I use wet glue because you can use double-sided tape if you're good at this. I'm not. I need wet glue because I always need to move it around and measure it and get it just right. So you want to adhere the pocket right next to the score line right here of the hinges that attach your pages. You'd never want to adhere pockets over that score line because then again your pocket won't lay flat, it'll stick up. So that's what I'm going to do now. Okay, so as you just saw me do, I added the glue to the hinge and I attached it to the inside of my page right underneath the score line of my hinge. You don't want it to go over it, so I'm still making sure that it's in the right spot. And then the other thing I didn't explain before I did it was you have to close your pocket. So for that, you just put a thin line of glue on one side and then on the bottom. And that's it. And then your pot, you know, let it dry unless you're using double-sided tape. And then when this is dry, you adhere your designer paper right on top. So it looks like that. And there you go. And then you can decorate your pockets and finish decorating your pages and whatever else that you want to do. So I'm going to finish this up and finish up the rest of the mini album. You know, adhere all the tags and get all this finalized. And then I will come back to show my finished album. Be right back. Okay, so I'm back to show the finished mini. And here you have it. So it's fully decorated, and I don't know, I have to admit, I really love how it came out. Here it is from the side, the back, the other side, and the front. So on the front, I fussy cut this owl from one of the from the paper collection. It was on one of the ATC cards that comes with the paper collection, and I just fussy cut it out, and I thought it would look really cute on the front cover. The closure is this thick twine or jute, and I decorated the front with some, this is like a fall, I guess, the mini branch that I had in my stash, and a little pumpkin and a couple of flowers and a little mini pine cone. And the closure I think I already mentioned, is this jute that I just wrap around the mini. And it opens like this. And I did hot glue the jute to the one corner on the back of the mini so this doesn't come off. So let's just quickly walk through the mini. So that's it. That wraps up this tutorial. I hope you like it and I hope you find some inspiration and you can make your own projects. The possibilities are endless. You can make all different kinds of themed mini albums for all different kinds of holidays. If you're interested in seeing how I made the borders using the thinlets or the thinner die cuts, stay tuned, or else just have a good night. Okay, so I'm back to show you how to make the base of the mini album using the thin dies. So I already got a lot of steps already done, so I can get through this fairly quickly. So I already mentioned which die I was using, which was the Spellbinders Nestabilities number 38, labels number 38. And there's two ways you can do this. The first way is pretty much cut your paper to be the width of your die. So this die, and go all the way, the whole way of the die. Don't just go off where the die actually cuts, but just measure the die itself. The die is 4¼ inches wide. So I cut the base of my mini into a strip of 4¼ inches wide, as well as all my paper, which is gonna adhere to the base of the mini. So, as previously mentioned, these thin dies cannot cut through layers of cardstock like the big dies. So basically you could either have to cut them, you basically have to cut the papers one by one. So you could do it that way, which is what I'm doing here. So the way I do it is I lay the die flush against all the sides, and I use washi tape to keep it in place. And I'm gonna only show this once because it's the same process for all of them. So once I have the die flush against the top, against the sides, I'm gonna place it in my Big Shot or whatever machine it is that you have. And you're gonna run it through, but you're only gonna run it through halfway. You're not gonna cut all the way down. So just about halfway through. And you can eyeball it because the plates are see-through, so you can see where you're cutting up to. And then you should have something that looks like this. See if you could see that. And then let's move this out of the way. Once you have that done, you finish cutting your base with your trimmer. And how far down you go depends on how high you want your mini album to be. So for this tutorial, I'm just gonna cut it all the way straight down and just make a really long, a really tall base. And I guide myself right here. I just put this up flush against where the blade cuts. And then I just finish cutting all the way down. And then, of course, you have the designer papers that have to go in the front and the back, right? So this is a part where you could do it one of two ways. You can actually run the designer paper. You could try running two designer papers together under the Big Shot, because this kind of designer paper isn't as thick as 110-pound cardstock. So I believe the dies should be able to cut through at least 2 pieces of designer paper, and you would cut them and run them through the same way I did the base. So I have one that's pretty much done here. So yes, you could see that. And then you would finish it off by trimming it with your trimmer. And then you would just adhere it, right? You would just layer it on top and adhere it, all right? And the other way of doing it, if you don't want it, because that's a lot of cutting, right? I don't know, it depends. Some people might say that's not a lot of cutting. Some people might think it is a lot of cutting. I felt that it was a lot of running it through the, the Big Shot too much, and I didn't want to do that. So the other way I did it, the other way to do it, and this is the way I did it for my Alpine mini album, is that I only cut the bases out, right? The pages for my base. And then what I did was, my designer paper, I cut it to be down the width of my base. So my base is actually 4 inches, right? You can measure that. It's actually a little under 4 inches. It's like 1 under 4 inches. So I made it to be the same width as the base of my mini. Okay, and there you go. So now it's the same base. And what I did was, I laid glue down on my base. I adhered my designer paper on top. And then with a craft knife, I laid it on its back once it's glued, right? Once you've already adhered this to the base. And then with the knife, I just sort of cut around it. And I just went around the design, and I used the base of the mini, my base as a guide. And since it's 110-pound cardstock, I was able to use it to just cut flush along the design, the border, right? The design, because it's not that fancy. So obviously this wouldn't work on intricate borders. You don't want to do it with too many intricate borders or swirls, because that's going to be kind of hard to cut around. But for something like this, it's a pretty simple design. You can use just a craft knife and just go flush up against the design and just trim the excess off. And again, this would be after you've adhered your designer paper to the base of the mini. So those are the 2 ways that you can go about doing this. So again, you can either cut them one by one and then glue them all together, or you can just cut the base and then adhere the designer paper, and then with a trimmer just trace around the edges and cut off the excess. And that's it. That's really the only 2 ways I know of to do this. Obviously, if you can come up with a different way, go right ahead and do it. But I'm just sharing how I went about doing it. All right. Thanks for stopping by, and have a good night.